Hey, Matt Starr here, beabetterdrummer.net. Thanks for visiting us. I'm here with the super talented and super cool Blair Sinta. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
You too.
We are at Swing House Rehearsal Studios in Los Angeles, which is the, hi Phil, the West Coast home for D'Addario and Evans. And it's a great place to record and rehearse and generally connect with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How often are you over here?
A lot. This new the new location's been here a year and a half, and I'm here, man. Well, I was at the old one a lot. I used to record it a lot and rehearse, and I'm here just as much.
Yeah.
You know, I can't wait. They're building a studio. I can't wait to get in here and work in here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's one of these things where you just never know you're gonna see, who you're
There
gonna
is
run
always
into.
someone here. Always. Yeah.
Yeah, which is what we were talking about a bit, is just like the act of just putting yourself out, you know, like putting on your shoes and walking out the door.
Right.
And just because you never know what's gonna happen.
Right.
But
Well, perfect example is Mark Schulman's here today.
Mhm.
I've never met Mark.
Right.
And he said, "Oh man, I've heard about you for years, and I've heard about him for years, and we just met out front because of you." So,
Right.
There we
Right.
go.
Yeah, exactly. And there's other guys in there rehearsing, Rudy Sarzo and these other guys.
Oh, wow, cool.
Which I got to go say hi.
Okay,
Because
cool.
Mark had a lens fall out of his glasses from a gig we did 2 weeks ago, and the sound guy gave it to me last night, and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna see Mark." So I brought it in, and then he said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm gonna talk to Blair." And so that's just an example of how stuff happens, you know. But again, if you don't put on your shoes and get out of your house, that's not gonna happen. So it's just about putting yourself out there and just walking forward and kind of following that. And we were talking a bit about that too, just you know, and I think there's some people that are doing the networking and the marketing thing, and they just instinctively do it. They maybe don't know what they're doing, but they're doing it right, which is evidenced by their career, you know.
Right. Right.
And then there's other folks that, you know, consciously work on stuff.
Right.
You know, and so we were talking about that. So, you know, what are some of the things that you've noticed and that you're doing as far as like maximizing your time and being productive and getting
Right.
more out of your efforts?
Well, to kind of recap, we were just having a conversation before this, but one thing lately is I think a lot of us have a love-hate relationship with social media. So you can get really caught up in it. It is definitely important in this day and age to have a presence online, but not to get so caught up in checking your Instagram post 5 times an hour to see how many people have looked at it. You know, put it up, let it be. You know, do it well. You know that people are going to check it out. You'll get more followers, all that stuff. Same thing, YouTube, and Facebook is the worst to me. It's like sometimes I'll go to just check if I've gotten a message, and then I end up reading the feed, and I get out of my headspace of like my creative headspace.
Right.
I'm really trying to work on like, hey, well, it's, if I'm going to take a break, okay, cool. I'm at the end of my cycle. I'm going to check Facebook, and I'll allow myself 10 minutes to like fill my brain with a bunch of nonsensical whatever,
Right. Yeah.
But try not to do that when I'm trying to be productive, creative.
So do you have a set time that you do that stuff in the respect of, so that you are putting yourself out there every day, but also that you're limiting it to a certain window of time?
Yeah, I'm not so regimented that I have like a schedule. I have kids, you have kids, so kids kind of, they make your day. You never know what your day is going to be with them.
Right.
And obviously being a musician and all the things that we have to do these days to make a living. So could be a recording session, could be, I'm writing, could be, you got to make a bunch of phone calls.
Yeah.
I have a tour coming up. I've been on the phone, trying to get cases and things like that. So I'm just trying to structure it where I have a list of things that I want to get done in the day, things I want to accomplish, and I try to think about that in the morning. And if I see if I recognize myself getting derailed by that, by social media or email, or just hanging out, like whatever. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be social media. It could be anything. I try to refocus and go like, oh, okay, did I get this done? Did I get this done? Okay, get off this. Get back on your path.
Yeah.
But I also try to allow myself time to like
Kind of roll with it.
Yeah, roll with it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you said you have a list. Do you have a physical handwritten list?
Yes.
Are you crossing things
Well,
off, or is it like a mental list?
I actually bought a notebook last week, I use Evernote a lot because it's great. It can come up on the phone, it can come up wherever, and that's super helpful. I'm trying the written thing. I'm old school.
Yeah.
I'm 42. You
Right.
know, like I'm used to writing things.
Right.
And I think I'll maybe tend to. Sometimes I'll forget about Evernote, and like, 5 days later I'll go, oh yeah, I put all this stuff on here I wanted to do, and
Right.
for some reason I forget about it. I think writing it, and having it kind of like near my kitchen table in the morning.
Yeah.
I see it. I think about it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And then I also can't get distracted by other things on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what's happening in here? you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and I enjoy crossing things off. I love crosses. So I have different colored pens.
Ah.
You know, so if I happen to have written it in black, I'll go give me a red one and just done. You know what I mean?
I
So
like
you kinda
that.
get that
Okay.
satisfaction. And that's
Yeah.
like a little, OCD, it's a little artsy, it's all my kind of
Right.
personality traits, but it's really like boom, and then look at that page and I go, we're done. Rip it up.
So, do you have a sheet for every day, or will you keep it on the same piece of paper? And
I have a sheet every day. So my routine, God willing, with the 2 kids and
Right.
a wonderful, super supportive wife, is get up, get the kids kind of set up, and then I go to Whole Foods. There's a Whole Food near me.
Yeah.
I get a tea, sit outside, and I make my list. Okay, what am I going to do today?
Mhm.
And that, stuff just kind of comes to me. Some things
Right.
will be obvious because it might be like you're saying, okay, if I have a tour come up, I need to set these things up. So that's already in my head.
Right.
But other things, again, I might just go, call Blair.
Right.
Okay, I'll call
Right.
Blair.
Right.
I don't know where that came from. I'll
Right.
try it. Let's see what
Right.
happens.
Right.
So I make my list, and then I have an office space where I go to and actually do the work. So what's been helpful for me is to sit at that Whole Foods place. I try not to do work. Like I might get excited about one of the things and go, I'm gonna text that guy right now about
Right.
something. And if I'm feeling the energy for it, okay, that's cool. But I
Right.
try and go, this is the space where I'm just like creatively coming up with stuff.
Right.
Then the office is the space where I'm doing this stuff. And it's kind of interesting because sometimes I've had experience where I really didn't get a chance to do that setup at Whole Foods, and I'll go to my office, and then I'm like, I can't think of anything
You're
to
lost.
do because that's in the do space. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the Whole Foods place is just like, what do I want to do today? It's totally wide open. So,
So do you think because there's a lot going on, there's like for me sometimes driving is like a good thing and a bad thing because my head really goes into like kind of creative thinking when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And I've read about this where like you're kind of physically your body's walking could be the same thing. Your body is you're doing something except
Yeah.
your brain is allowed to go somewhere else.
Right.
Do you think that's Whole Foods too where like
totally.
the people are around? But if you get in a quiet space then everything is still and you're
Yeah, if it's too quiet, that can be weird. And
Yeah.
then also it becomes like a habit. So that space for me, I just
Yeah.
go there. Because I've thought, like, I've done it sometimes, like on our front step, I'll just go out there and sit out there. Sometimes it sort of works. I'm like, no, I need my Whole Food. That's like my routine. And
Mhm.
so, we're like ritual-based
yeah.
creatures. So,
Yeah. Cool.
And something you said, too, that I want to address is you said, like, post the thing on, Instagram. And then don't sit there and check it for the rest of the day to see how many people.
Mm-hmm.
So is that you've learned to kind of just do the work and then just let it be?
Yeah, I mean, because
know?
I've done that too.
Yeah.
And kind of weird, like, who cares? Who cares?
Right.
Like, are you gonna get bummed if only like 30 people liked it?
Right.
Like, no. Like the idea is like to put it out, and I did have a great thing happen where like I was putting up part of what I do. Part of the way I'm using Instagram is I record things in my home studio, and then I'm writing library type music, and so I don't post anything until it's all mixed, it's all processed, which I don't do it every day. I can't. It's too much work. But
Your videos are amazing, and I forgot who it was, but I interrupted a conversation like last week when I saw it, and someone goes, I was just telling him that his videos sound better than anybody's videos, and
thanks.
just the playing is exceptional, and also the sound is exceptional, and that's all.
Thanks, man.
It's part of being creative because you're a producer as well as a drummer,
Yeah.
as well as an engineer, as well as
Right. So I put something out there, and a guy who had been a fan of my playing, turns out he's the CEO of this company called Flick Tracks, which is a library company. It's on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And after I put maybe, I don't know, between 5 and 10 of these up, he's like, can I get these tracks? Are they available? And that's exactly what I was trying to do. Not necessarily through Instagram, but I was trying to just get it out there. So like, hey, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they've taken me on as a writer, and they're pitching me to
Good.
things, and like, I mean, I kind of didn't expect that to happen through that, but it did.
Right.
So
and so kind of on the cosmic side of things,
yeah,
you know, you had that intention, you had that thing, like, I'd like to, you know, do library stuff.
yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna start recording some stuff, put it out.
right.
And do that,
Right.
see what happens, and
Right.
then boom.
Right.
So you didn't seek this guy out, you didn't maybe
I
even
didn't
know
seek
the
it out.
company.
I didn't seek it out. I will say that I did kind of come up with a plan of like, I'm not gonna put up just drum oriented things because I feel like there's a million cats out there that have way better chops than me, and they have like, I'm just not gonna compete in that market.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to put videos out there of like, hey, check out these double paradiddle blah blah blahs around the kit.
Yeah,
People are gonna go to somewhere else to check that out.
right.
I thought my angle was, well, I think my strength is in the sounds that I get out of my studio, and building things around those sounds, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the angle that I've decided to take with it.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that's another thing too about finding your voice and realizing, I mean, have you had a scenario where, you know, on your way up, you kind of go, well, gee, should I play like that guy? Should I play like the guy on the record? And then realizing, no, the best this guy can do is to play it like this guy,
Right.
respectful of the material and what they're looking for,
Right.
but like to be me, that's the best
Yeah.
thing I'm gonna be, rather than trying to be Steve Ferroni or Jim
Yeah,
Donner or
well, I
whoever
think this touches on just like a whole, this is kind of wide open, this is a wide open topic, which we can come down to auditioning and things like that.
else. Yeah,
The kind of player I am and I like to be is, I've been pretty fortunate where the gigs that I've done, I've been allowed to kind of do me.
right,
You know,
yeah,
within the context of what's appropriate musically.
Sure.
So with Melissa Etheridge, when I auditioned for her, it was a pretty small group of people,
Mhm.
and I ended up playing with Melissa for like 5 years, and I made a record with her. But I wanted to, and her catalog spans like 25 years, so
Mhm.
sonically they're all over the place.
right,
They're from like late 80s to current. So drum sound wise on the different players and everything, it's everything from Karen Aronoff to Craig Craft to like different people. So like, am I gonna cop all that? No.
right,
Like, there's no way. And some of the stuff sounds, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it sounds dated.
Mhm.
So it's like, am I gonna try to do all that? No. So going into the audition, I thought, well, I'm just gonna do it the way I would do it, and hopefully she digs that.
yeah,
And if she doesn't, what am I, you know,
Right.
if she doesn't, she doesn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
right,
So I went into the audition, kind of did my thing, and I ended up getting the gig. And then, so the first rehearsal was coming up, and I thought I was trying to get a kit together to be able to cover mainly the new record at the time, but also go back and cover these other things. And some of them have loops from like late 90s, early 2000s, like
Right.
these lo-fi loops. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to have like some kind of side thing with this. So I'm like, you know, my angle is like, I'm gonna bring in some different sounds and things like that. And if I get a look, or if I get like a nod, or even like a verbal like, hey, I'm not into that,
Right.
then I know, like, okay, cool, just back to basics.
right,
But fortunately, she was like, whoa, what's going on here? That's great.
yeah,
And I was like, okay, green light to
Mhm.
like kind of do what I like to do.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I've been pretty fortunate, and Alanis was the same way. She was like, yeah, great, do your thing. Like, and that was
Mhm.
another long-term gig I had. So I've been fortunate in those ways. I think there are some gigs, and maybe I wouldn't even be right for these gigs anyway, where I think you have to stick to the script.
Yeah.
And you're hired to stick to the script.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And do you do a thing that I've employed at times, which is, okay, I'm gonna really, you know, I will watch if someone had the gig before me, I'll
Mhm.
watch, okay, how are they doing these things
Mhm.
live? So what's this artist used to hearing and
Right.
feeling?
Right.
But then knowing, I'm gonna, over the course of the next 6 months, steer it a little bit,
Mhm.
respectfully again,
Yeah.
but just like, I'll work some of my stuff, but I'm gonna start with really like,
Right.
you know, being pretty true to that.
I think when I was younger, I mean, I can definitely say, you know, now I'm kind of, I'll just try to be very open. When I was younger, when I got the Alanis gig, I was 28,
Mhm.
and Taylor had done it, and then Gary Novak did it, and they were looking for a new drummer, And I kind of thought like, well, I remember seeing Taylor do that gig. Like I remember seeing the MTV movie Awards.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, who the fuck is that guy?
Right. Yeah, we
like,
all saw that.
Exactly. That was like and I was like, I kind of want to do the gig like that.
Yeah.
And Gary's a friend of mine. I love Gary, but I can't play like Gary. Like not many people in the fucking world can play like Gary.
Yeah.
You know. So I was like, I'm gonna kind of go like that. I'm gonna try to take that template and do that. And I was really not. I'm not a loud player like Taylor is. But I kind of took the approach of like, okay, if I want this gig, that's what needs to happen. That energy and that thing. And the funny thing is, we were in a room, like this room is pretty small, but the audition was in a room like this size with a full band. Wow. And when I walked in that room, my musical sensitivity says, don't blow the doors off, because it's just going to be non-musical. But my instinct said, you know what, you got to come in here and play as if you're going to be playing in an arena.
Yeah.
To you know, otherwise it's not going to go across. So I went full tilt in a room this size.
Got it.
And I got it.
Yeah.
And there was an immediate reaction of like.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that, the power, the volume of guys. Even if a guy has a sound that sounds a more restrained, if a guy's been playing in arenas, there's a certain amount of impact that happens. And that's something I noticed, like if we're on the road and there'll be, you know, like a local band opening up, and it's like, just there's not that power. And it doesn't have to be Tommy Lee, but just a certain level of impact to cut through.
Yeah.
And how do you approach this if you're playing bigger places when they say like bring it down? Does that mean truly bring it down, or just tighten up the hi-hats? Like, are you hitting the kick drum and snare lighter in those spots, or are you just maybe tightening it up but keeping the intensity the same?
We're talking like an arena?
Yeah, like when you're playing bigger places like that.
I mean, when it gets that big, I kind of figure it's on the sound man.
So if there's a breakdown part or something, you're gonna keep that kick drum pretty much where you had it all night.
I mean, I'll still play dynamically, but I figure the sound man is, at that point, the drums are too small. It's an acoustic instrument, and you're fighting a PA system.
Yeah.
You only really have so much dynamic control. It's really on the sound man. So, am I gonna play dynamically? Yes. Would I play like jazz touch style in that? No.
Yeah.
You know, but also the opposite. I don't play like I played 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like when I was on the Alanis gig, I was like balls out, like I was like playing as loud as I could. But at this point, I wouldn't, if I did that gig again, I wouldn't do that anymore because number one, I don't have the energy to do it anymore. But number two is like, I just feel like the sound man is going to take care of it. Like if he needs more kick and snare, hopefully I'm giving it to him already.
No, right.
But he's gonna ride that, you know, in a huge place like that.
Yeah.
I feel like in a theater or something like that, you have a little more actual dynamic control of the room. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so on the tip of back to the idea of just doing the work and putting it out there, like you're saying with your social media stuff.
Yeah.
Is that an approach that you have also to an audition? Like, okay, I'm going to prepare for this audition, but I'm going to go do that work, and I'm going to leave it there. You know, no matter how much I want the gig, I'm not going to keep could I have done this differently or any of that kind of stuff?
Right. I'll rewind. I went to a lot of formal study. I went to University of North Texas, and a lot of being there was auditioning. Like you're kind of put through the grinder of auditioning.
Yeah.
So I got pretty used to that process. And when I first moved to LA, there were a lot of Barry Squire auditions.
Right.
Different than it is now. There was like cattle call things, and you know, I finally landed one after who knows how many I did, but I was finally the right guy for something, and I really kind of think that like the gigs that I've gotten, it's because I really, really wanted the gig.
Like you really felt a connection to the music, and you're like, I really want to do this.
And there was one artist, and when it came up, I had been traveling a lot. I didn't really want to be on the road, but I was like, oh man, that would be the shit. But there was something that I was like, this is not the right time for me to do this. I want to be home. I want to cultivate trying to do studio work.
Yeah.
That's where my head was at. And I didn't want to do another loud kind of rock gig. And I got a call back. I went and did the audition. I got a call back, and I didn't get the gig. And I was kind of like, that's a bummer. But I think I knew that it wasn't the right time for me to do it.
Yeah.
And looking back, a friend of ours did the gig, and I wouldn't have been the right guy at the time with the vibe of the band and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I've gotten to play with this person,
Artist. Yeah. Right.
since then.
Anyhow.
Right.
Yeah.
So it all worked
Yeah.
out.
Right.
So that's some pretty like heady shit, but
Yeah, but
but I really do think my wife has said it to me. Like I've gotten calls where like, hey, would you want to do this? And I kind of go like, oh yeah, man, that would be great. And already I blew it.
It's out there. Yeah. Right. Like energetically.
Exactly.
universally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and that's an interesting point too, because I know, guys that are coming up, and all of us, I think to a degree or not, is you want work. You
Yeah.
want to work. You
Yeah.
you need to make money, and
Yeah.
you want to work. You want to be out there. I heard Kiss when I was 7 years old. And I'm like, that. What
Right.
is- I don't know what that is, but I just want to do that.
Right.
That's all I want to do is be out there playing and touring and doing all that stuff. So
Right.
there's that. But then what you're talking about is a maturity and a maybe an attitude of like, I'm grateful for the work, but there'll be others like it'll work out. And then what you're saying in your story, it shows that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To like really being true. Again, I think goes back to being true to yourself,
Mhm.
which is why you get as much work as you do, because you are, and that comes through in your
Right.
playing.
Right.
And then so they're like, that guy does that thing. We want that thing. Okay, well, Blair's that guy.
Right. And I will say that to this day, I do a lot of work that it's not my favorite thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I love how it came back around, and then
Yeah.
you got to play with the artist anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had that scenario where you play with somebody and you go, yeah, I kind of knew. Like part of you is like, oh my god, this is amazing. Another party's like, yeah, no, I'm like the perfect guy for this. Yeah, of course I'm doing this gig in a really humble way, but just kind of like, you go, well, yeah, this really makes sense actually. So it's kind of the two things.
I think so.
Like when you got to play with that artist again, and for the first time after it all, was it kind of like, yeah, I kind of figured this might happen, or not? Or did you not?
I don't know if I figured it would, but I still wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's a great example. Doug Pinnick,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, we connected, like, not that long ago, right? And you invited me down to the whiskey thing, and I was like, oh, man, I love Doug, and blah, blah, blah. And then sure enough, I was like, hey, dude, I really want to play a tune with Doug.
Yeah.
And, like, you helped facilitate with
Of
that.
course.
But going down there that first night and seeing Doug there and playing, I was like, oh, man, if I could play with Doug, because I was a huge King's X fan as a kid.
Mhm.
So, and I told you all this. But, yeah, it helped. I think part of that, like, even though you were the main facilitator of that, part of that, like I got to play with that guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to your point too, and for you guys, if you had never said anything, I mean, I know you're a great drummer. I'd put you with anybody. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I would never hesitate. But if I didn't know, if you didn't just say like, man, I love Doug and I'd love to play. And hey, man, I'd love to play with Doug. Just
Right.
putting that bug.
Right.
I go, okay. So that put it in my
Yeah.
ear, and then I was putting songs together for the next week or whatever it was. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put Blair on it. So
Yeah.
again, just putting it out there.
Yeah.
And getting over, I mean, in that conversation we had was comfortable, but it's like
Right.
getting over any discomfort you might have in putting it out there. And that's something we were kind of talking about before. Like, how much do you put it out there,
Right.
and what's your comfort level? Because we're talking about some cats that are like, hey, I'm the fucking guy, you need me.
Right.
And other guys have a more kind of organic,
Yeah.
less forward approach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how did you find that, or how are you finding that for yourself, or what's comfortable,
Yeah.
but also
so,
putting it out there,
Right.
going, hey, I really would like to play with you.
yeah, when we talked last night, and I was like, hey, what are we talking about today? Because you had just asked me to come down. I was like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
I was thinking about it going to bed, and I was like, I remember there were times when I moved to LA in '96, and I was 22. And I did like jazz gigs, I did wedding gigs, I played in restaurants, blah, blah, blah. And I used to sit there sometimes and get really bummed and be like, how is this gonna lead to playing with like a real artist on a real stage on a tour, and like none of it added up to me. I was like, man, I'm doing this crap blues gig out in Reseda, and it's 2 a.m, and then I got to be at this church gig at 7:30 tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
This like I didn't see how this was gonna get to the other.
Right.
But the reality is, which kind of goes back to the whole thing, is you're out meeting different people.
Right.
And as long as you're playing well, representing yourself well, then those little fabrics, those vines, those branches are getting to other people.
Right.
You know, and that one guy, you meet one guy, and you're like, oh, he's the guy. Oh yeah, I did this shit restaurant gig with this guy, but he was cool and he played great, and I think he'd be good for this.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think too that's important for guys coming up, because I think it's just generally in life, I think, you know, if someone has a vision of something, you know, they take the action, but then they don't see the result right away, so then they give up. So, I mean, a really basic, obvious thing is like, oh, I'm going to put myself out there on Facebook. I put up a post, no one clicks like, or 5 people click like.
Right.
Put a picture of my kid, they get 1,000 likes. Okay, so no one's interested in this. You know what I mean? It's like I played with Gene Simmons, and then my kid, put on a mask, and it's like those two things are getting. So, but what you're saying is, and again for you guys, is that vision can seem a million miles away. And so you're in LA, you went to North Texas, you're friends with guys that are getting work, and North Texas has such a great, legacy. So, you're doing all the right things if you were to look at it on paper, but in that moment and driving back from Reseda, but just to that point, I think, again, for guys that are, even guys that are living in LA, but if a guy's living in the Midwest somewhere and there's not really music scene out there, and they're going, how is this ever going to, well, just don't ever stop with that vision and keep doing that next thing, and it will get you there.
Yeah.
And if you keep having the same result and you're not getting the results you want, then be willing to take a look at that and ask guys who are a step further.
Right.
Hey, how are you doing this? How did this happen? And people are usually pretty happy to share that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can cultivate your own thing, and even if you're not in LA. Sometimes it's harder in LA. There's so many of us here, and there are so many of us trying to get gigs that sometimes you're like, whoa, like, oh, that dude's doing it? Okay, whatever. But then in a smaller town, if there's a scene and you want to be the guy that does that, you could still be that guy,
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of friends that I used to play at the Hotel Cafe a lot, a handful of years ago, and man, I have so many friends that have careers in one of my friends became a very well known in Holland. She's Dutch already, but she was living here for years. But then she ended up having a career in Holland. You know what I mean? Or it sounds like a joke, but if you're big in Japan and you're making a career in Japan, great.
Yeah, right.
So
exactly.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to. Not everybody can be YouTube or whatever. But if you can make a living in a pocket, it's like, oh man, I can go do shows in Korea and make half my income, over 2 weeks in a year.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, and we've all had friends or have done gigs where, guys that go to Japan, guys that play with artists in Italy, or certain areas of the world where, China, where we might not have ever heard of this artist, but, they just played 7 nights at the Tokyo Dome, and it's like, okay, there you go. So there's a lot of scenarios, and what I've realized too is, if I'm in a spot and I want to be at this spot, how that's going to happen, I can't imagine that. If I knew that, I'd just do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like if you're working a job, you want to make, $10,000 a month and you're working a job for $20 an hour. Well, you can't work enough hours in the week to get there. Right. So it has to be something bigger that you don't know yet. You know what I mean? So just keep putting on your shoes, going out, meeting people, making those connections, putting stuff. I mean, social media is just the most amazing, incredible tool. Yeah. I mean, because I'm a little bit older than you, but it's like, I came up as a teenager. We were cold calling clubs. You know what I mean? Like we wanted to play, and we're trying to get into these bars.
I think I'm 42. Man.
Couple years, yeah. 45.
Okay.
45. So, but same, turning the TV with the dial at the old days. And,
totally.
But social media is just that I could post something and have some producer in Europe see it and go, hey, this guy's
Check
cool.
out that guy.
Yeah, you know what I mean. That's just amazing. So the web,
It's almost easier. It's harder and easier in a way.
Mhm. What do you mean by that?
Well, the idea of like being in a band these days, and getting signed and having tour support, and be able to go through 2 or 3 records and building your band through that doesn't exist anymore.
Right,
You have to do that yourself.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can make a video and have as many as, whatever, 1 million people see it, that didn't exist.
Right.
So, there's a give and take to the possibilities,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think too on the subject of branding, and that's like can seem like a corporate word or whatever, but the thing is, who are you? What do you do? And there's, I'm sure you've had people forward you videos of some kids who they keep putting out videos of the metal drummer kid, or the
Right.
kid who does this, or the kid
Right.
who does that, and it's like those people, unknowingly or not, are branding themselves. And so I just met with a guy yesterday. He plays guitar, but he also sings, but he also does this, he also does that, and he goes, should I just kind of focus it? And I was like, yeah, is that something, like what you're saying, like putting out the drum videos, you wanted it to sound a certain way and look a certain way and not be kind of all things to all people. It's like, so that's, whether that's conscious or not, it's branding.
Yeah.
Even though it might be you just being
Yeah.
creatively,
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about this.
Like, does
morning
branding
also.
feel gross to you? And you're just like, what, I'm just going to be creative in the way I like to be creative, and that will be my branding.
No, I get it. It's the day and age we live in.
Mm-hmm.
I think coming from like being kind of like an indie rock 90s kid, the idea of like, licensing music used to be like, you don't do that.
Right.
Like, all credit is out the window.
Right.
And then people started to do it. Next thing you know, you're hearing the Who on like a toilet, like a sponge commercial. Or
Right,
something.
yeah.
You're like, whoa,
Yeah,
okay.
right. Yeah.
So, does it feel gross? No, it doesn't feel gross. It feels different than like how I grew up thinking.
Yeah.
But I also feel like that's the way the world is.
Right.
You either jump on board in a certain. I don't know. There's no blanket answer, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just curious because I know
Yeah.
a lot of young drummers I've talked to be like, Facebook is bullshit, and it's like,
Right.
dude, it's
Yeah.
a massive, amazing tool.
Yeah.
And so,
That's the thing.
artists-
I think that. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
I think that, like, it's still relatively new, Facebook. I think people will learn to cultivate it. Like, some people will just be like, blah, blah, blah. Like, they'll just all.
Lunch.
Exactly, yeah. I think other people will strictly use it as a tool, and it will turn into. They'll use it how they want to use it.
Right.
People already do that. But
Right.
I think the next generation, they're not going to be so fascinated with
Right.
it.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh yeah, this has always been here. And like, my friends put up this, but I'm not down with that. I do it like this, if they do it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think what I was getting at is where you were with the idea of the marketing and networking and all that stuff. Because I think as artists we can pull the artist card, which typically means less work and less money.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it feels true. It
Right.
feels like being authentic.
Right.
And it's like. And for me, what's been most instructive is, let me just, who are the guys that I admire? Okay, him, he's always on there. Oh, him, he's always on there. Okay, fuck it, I guess that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to just kind of get over that discomfort with putting themselves out there or whatever it is.
Right.
And so the guys have different levels of doing that
Yeah.
and how they look at it or what
Yeah.
makes them comfortable. And something that I found is helpful, telling all the drummers is young guys, like, you're inspiring people. So look at it like that.
Right.
Like you got stuff to share. I mean, when I see your videos, I'm like, damn, that's pocket is killer, or that snare, what's he doing? He's got a little towel. So like, I'm being inspired, where if someone is feeling uncomfortable, like putting themselves out there, well, hey man, if you have any talents to share, then just share them.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just a different angle on the same kind of.
Yeah, it's easy to get myopic on your site. When I was touring last summer, I put it out where I was like going to be. I'll give lessons like when I'm in town if you're around. So I only gave a handful, but it was really interesting. Like being in whatever town, and not like my perspective is always like LA. Like so many great musicians here, great drummers, things like that. And you get into a smaller place, like, oh yeah, they don't know like I forget that people like the knowledge that I've gained over 20 years in LA and being able to be around like world-class engineers and musicians and things like that is like that. You start to think, oh yeah, everybody knows that, especially with social media. Everybody already knows that.
Right.
But the reality is like, oh no, so that information still needs to be disseminated to people that want it.
Right.
You know, and getting it firsthand. There's nothing better than getting it firsthand.
Right.
As great as social media is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the truth. And getting it from someone who's doing it.
Yeah.
You know, who's actively doing it out there in the field.
Yeah.
You know.
You're going to get something I think more tangible in person. It's kind of redundant, but
yeah. Right.
but yeah. You're going to get something more tangible from it. Maybe they're going to say one thing that's specifically to you that you wouldn't get through a video.
Right.
Because you'll ask a question or whatever.
Right. And I think too we've all had the experience where, you know, you learn a set and you're like, okay, I got it. But then you go play it live once and you're like, okay, I really got it. And I'm also aware that I don't have this part. I'm going to really lock that in. But it just kind of like locks it all in.
Yeah.
And so I think guys that are out there in the field like yourself, you just have a practical experience. And also too, what not to worry about and not, that's just not as important, which is so much it can be. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but we've all been distracted by gospel chops. You know, I go, fuck, how the fuck? And it's like, okay, stop. When are you going to use this?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I'll spend 20 minutes watching such a paradiddle thing, and I'm like, wait, hold on, because we got about 10 minutes before we got to go to bed.
Right.
Yeah, when are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, at the end of a song.
Yeah.
No.
You and me know.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that's not true for everybody, but I think you know, being clear on what is a useful tool and then what maybe is not necessary.
Right.
And to have an interest in exploring other rhythms and ways of doing it, that's a healthy, awesome thing.
Totally.
But as a professional,
yeah,
what do I want to focus on?
Yeah, and also, you know, kind of back to like cultivating your voice is. I was watching something this morning and somebody was talking about like I came from the thing of like learn all styles, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to be a studio musician that could, you know, play a shuffle or play jazz or Latin, not so much, but you know,
was
at
that
least
a
know.
North Texas thing, or was that pre for you, like just in your own head?
I think just what I was into as a kid, I think I kind of knew that I had to do that. I mean, you know, I've studied Latin, but like, you know, don't call me for that.
Right.
At heart, I'm a rock guy, but I probably listen to jazz more than anything. I'm getting off point. But sometimes people say like, well, you got to learn all styles. You got to be able to do this. And then I see another drummer that really does one thing incredibly well. And I'm like, well, that cat doesn't need to learn how to play Latin beats. I mean, maybe there's a certain aspect of it that could be influential to his thing, but he doesn't need to do that. You know, so the idea of cultivating a style, you know, that wasn't for me when I was young. It wasn't like I'm just going to do this, but I don't think that's always put out there as an option. Like, do the shit out of this. I mean, you're definitely gonna have a smaller, you know, home base of like what you're gonna be able to do as far as work. Like if you only do one thing, but if you do the shit out of it, maybe it doesn't matter.
You're the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're the guy.
So growing up, were your drum heroes primarily band guys or hired guys?
No. Well, early on it was like Alex Van Halen and Neil Peart.
Yeah.
Bonham. But then I got into like, you know, Vinny and Weckl and Dennis Chambers and those guys.
At what age did that kind of?
15, 16. Yeah.
Yeah. And so which would you say were a greater influence on your playing? Like when you look at how you play today.
That's an interesting question. I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Yeah. I just thought of it. So
but
I don't know that there is an answer. You know?
It's funny though. I can think back and think like, you know, I'm not in a band now, but my last band I was in, I always felt like developing parts was something that like I was good at for the song.
Yeah.
And then, you know, somewhere along the line I was like, well, where did this come from? And I think it came from Neil Peart. Because that cat comes up with amazing parts for
Right.
songs. It doesn't have to be like the fills are great, but he comes up with great parts.
Right.
And I think a lot of that, deconstructing those tunes and learning that stuff, I think a lot of it came from that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily sound like it.
Right.
And you know, I'm definitely not comparing myself to him, but I think the way I listen to those seeped in. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, okay, this part needs to have an identity. This part of the song needs to have an identity. And what is that? Is it opening the hi-hat in a certain certain spot?
Yeah.
Is it the kick pattern? Is it
Right.
what is it? You know?
Right. Yeah. And are you from the school of Neil where he would, okay, this is it, but I'm going to add the hi-hat, and then I'm going to add a thing the next time.
Yes.
So someone's consciously listening, and he's taking you on this journey.
Growing the
Or
song.
are you more of a Clyde, Stubblefield, or Phil Rudd thing where it's like, I'm just going to get a thing and just beat it into the ground? And obviously that could change song to song.
Sure. See, I would put Phil Rudd in that category where he grows. I mean, Back in Black, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the cymbal crashes are like genius how
Yeah, right.
how that song is laid out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I'm more that. It's like,
Yeah.
I want, okay, the last time the chorus is coming around. Is it appropriate? Of course.
Yeah.
But one more thing that you know, whether it's like finally go to the ride cymbal or whatever, like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
yeah. But I love that. I love that constructive thing. Yeah.
Right, and you're kind of, you know, listening.
Yeah.
And someone who's been influential in my drumming has been Paul Rogers.
Mhm.
When you listen to him with Free, you know, where he'll start here, but he'll, the next verse, and then that last chorus is
Mhm.
the thing. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's cool,
Mhm.
okay. And it's kind of sometimes easier to
Right.
hear too, because
Right.
it's like a vocal.
And it could be as subtle as opening the hi-hat,
Right.
just a little more on a chorus or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you, are you a lyrics guy? Do you like, if, you know, it was like in a shot, and are you gonna
Sure.
like hit the crash
Sure.
on that, or you kind of do some
Sure.
stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but so when you're going into a song, if it is written and the lyrics are written, are you kind of listening to the lyrics, going, well, "What's this about?" Oh, okay, yeah. And does that factor into your playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so that like the producer side of your.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Or that led you to be a producer, whichever. But.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or if there's a rhythmic thing in the vocal phrasing, maybe you can play with that.
Yeah.
You know, just for like 2 beats or something like that.
Right.
But that becomes a special moment in the song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Which relationships have been, if you kind of had to look back objectively, which relationships have been the most fruitful for you as far as getting work? Is it, you know, your relationship with the drummers, producers, bass players, guitar players, just generally?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have one answer for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I worked for Glenn Ballard for years, and I got that through while playing with Alanis. I met him, and eventually he started to hire me as, you know, play on the records he was producing.
Yeah.
So that, you know, just having that relationship was pretty massive for definitely growth as a musician, but also resume.
Yeah.
But I got in with Glenn not only because of Alanis, but at one point they couldn't get the guy they wanted for a record, and my friend Joel Shearer, who I was in a band with, was like, call Blair. So if it wasn't, even though Glenn knew me already and I had
Right.
worked for him,
But is that two?
I wasn't like that guy
Yeah.
yet. So yeah, so my guitar player friend was like, get that guy.
That guy, yeah.
So, I don't think there's one answer for that.
Yeah.
But I do think that like people who are in this, how about this? People who are working in the scene that you want to work in.
Yeah.
Those are the most influential people.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, if
Yeah.
you're hanging about with people that kind of are doing work that you don't necessarily want to be a part of,
Mm-hmm.
then you might end up doing a lot of things you don't want to be a part of.
Right.
You know?
Right, yeah. And that goes
Yeah.
back to, again, you know, balancing that line between just getting out there and connecting with human beings.
Yeah.
But then also as a, you know, a professional person, okay, you know, this is what I want to do, so I kind of want to target what I'm doing and make the most
Yeah.
of
Find your
my time
scene.
and
Yeah.
just kind of balance it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that information can be
Yeah.
helpful. What's your favorite city in the world?
Oh man, really? I don't have a favorite city. I'll give you.
Give me one of them and,
I'll give
and
you-
why. What
okay.
pops into your head?
Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an incredible city to walk around in. It's just so beautiful and so unique,
Yeah.
and a great art museum.
Mm-hmm.
People are always cool. There's obviously fun things to do there.
Recreational.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's one of them.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
In an ideal world, how much time would you spend on tour a year?
Ah, at this age,
Yeah. Right.
in my current life, that's a complicated question. And maybe we've talked about this, but I have a love-hate relationship with touring at this point, with 2 kids and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
I love playing every night. I love playing in theaters more than arenas, but I love playing in, or you know, kind of not huge places, but good-sized places.
Yeah.
I love the kind of ritual that happens when you're on the road.
Mm-hmm.
There's a schedule. You know you're going to get fed. You know you have X hours to do these things. But I hate being away from home right now.
Yeah.
So
that's something that's obviously changed over the years.
yeah, you know, and there's been times where there was a few years where I didn't tour at all, and I was only working in the studios, and I loved it. But I also felt like there was I felt like my playing wasn't as good, because when you play for 3 minutes and then you stop and
Right.
you go listen and you play for another 3 minutes,
Yeah.
and then at the end of the day you kind of empty your cache. You're like, you hear a song 10 years later, and you're like, I think that's me. I recognize that. Like,
Right.
you know, I've had that happen. It's like,
Yeah.
I know this song. Oh, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love that, I feel like the road is a necessary part of what I do.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great. You know, we've all had experiences. I think where you see a fellow drummer, and you know they go out and they come back, and you're like, whoa, you've been on the road.
Yeah.
You know, like just the physicality of,
Yeah.
of the physical prowess to do whatever you want to do, and the strokes get a little bigger and more open, and yeah. So I think that's
Or
a really
fluidity, yeah.
yeah,
So I guess to answer your question, maybe 2 months.
yeah, okay,
2 months a year.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that road stuff too, it's like I always think about this like with like someone like Hal Blaine, who's gifted and amazing and as a drummer, but also as a human being, being the kind of the MD of all those players and corralling and on the business side. But anyone who played 3 sessions a day would get way better. You know what I mean? So it's like you think of those scenarios where. Again, these guys are already gifted. That's why they're in the room. But then to be playing 3 sessions a day and just hand working with the greatest artists in the world, the greatest songwriters and the greatest
Yeah.
producers, and then imagine how much better you would get. So it's
Yeah.
like boom, 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 and they're just
Yeah.
like leaping
Yeah.
ahead. And so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's few and far between
Yeah.
to happen these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, there's
Yeah.
some guys that are fortunate to maybe have that.
Right.
But that's
It's that. I mean, at least at that level, certainly. I mean, there's probably cats that are working out of their own studio and doing records for.
yeah.
people,
I
you
think
know
there's
what
a
I
few
mean?
guys in this
But-
town that do that, but it's just the work's not. There's not that much work
Yeah.
for that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite drum kit of all time? Maybe not even a brand that you play, but the favorite kit, era, finish, sizes, the one that you just go, oh yeah, that's my favorite.
Oh,
It could be something as a kid that it was just like the coveted.
no, man. I guess, man. I have all these images flashed
Right.
up through my head, like all Alex Van Halen's kits, all
Right.
Stuart Copeland's kits,
Yeah.
all Neil's kits in different colors.
Yeah.
Tony Williams, like that yellow Gretsch.
Right.
I mean, that's such an impossible question. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Any one of those. How
Okay.
about
Yeah.
that?
Sure. Yeah. And Alex Van Halen is one too. I was looking through. I just put an Alex Van Halen kit, 1978, 1979.
Yeah.
And just looked because there was a few I didn't.
The black
know
and white
about.
stripes.
Those are
The
gorgeous.
fair warning tour, maybe.
Is that what that is? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
With the
Yeah.
But yeah, that kid is gorgeous, and that's actually at the Guitar Center in Hollywood.
Yes.
So if you're in Hollywood, go
Yeah.
check it out. But you know, there was all these different ones, and I realized like he always had the semblance of a kit, like boom, boom, boom. That's always there, and then he had another kick drum, and then just added stuff. So you see the kit in there, even like the '84 kit where he had the Simmons things. It's like the kit's right there, but then he's got the Octobans and the thing and the thing and the thing and the fire extinguisher.
I can't go out with electronic pads here. That's not gonna look good.
It's just unbelievable. And as a kid, I was so baffled that he went. I'm like, that's what those Octobi. I've heard them at the drum store. They don't sound like that.
Right.
Like, how's he do? You know what I mean? So, yeah, just some brilliant stuff. So, who is your and this could be a but just a one word answer is who's your favorite drummer of all time? Just like,
impossible. Tony Williams.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Coated or clear?
Coated.
Always.
Nope.
Okay. Live or?
I will say probably 80% of the time coated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2-ply, 1-ply?
2-ply.
Mm-hmm.
Last summer, no, 2 summers ago, I went out with pinstripes on the top and no heads on the bottom.
How's that?
So awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah.
And did you play differently?
Yeah. Pretty meat-headed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In a good way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's better than Buddy Rich?
Technically?
Just
Who's better than Buddy Rich? Yeah, that's tough. I watched the Buddy solo the other day and it's unreal.
right.
For all the cats that are so technically amazing these days,
Mm-hmm.
he can kind of do, like with what's in one of Buddy's solos, he can kind of cover all that stuff.
Right.
Whether it's like, I don't want to name names, but you know what I mean?
Right,
It's just
right.
like, it's like, yeah, he could probably do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, that's my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I had that, and that's a question I was asked, because to me the answer, no one. Now, technically, okay, Bonham's feel, this guy's that.
Yeah.
When I asked Mover that question, he was like, well, he said Vinnie Colaiuta. That he just right away goes Vinnie Colaiuta, and then he kind of dissected things. But yeah, for my money, just someone who picks up a pair of sticks. Go here, just do some stuff on the kit. It's like Buddy is just always the one. And just like there's never been a clip where my jaw doesn't hit the ground.
Right. Well, I also think about the gear that he was on. I mean, he came from calfskin heads, right? And he came from playing a Ludwig Speed King pedal, and who even knows what was before that? I don't really know.
Right.
I mean, he was doing that stuff on like we have DW 9000s or whatever.
Right. Yes.
We have all this.
Turbo.
Exactly. He was doing that shit on a Ludwig Speed King, man.
Yeah. Hey.
Come on.
Yeah, I know. I know. Serious. Who should run the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Who, if you, and this is a lot of these are teenager questions. You know what I mean? Batman or Superman. But if one person could be in charge of saying who gets in and who doesn't, who would you put in charge of that?
Oh, this is good. I need a minute for this.
Yeah, sure.
Who should be in charge? Who does it now?
It's a cast of wealthy.
The committee?
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So it's very. It took Kiss way too long, Cheap Trick, and some of these bands that
Right.
influenced millions of kids to play music to get in there.
It's hard because it's like politics. You don't want it to be influenced by money or labels.
Right.
And you want it to be people that are credible, whatever that means to you, in all genres.
Yeah, one person.
Yeah. One person?
Yeah.
The only way to answer this is with an absurd answer. So,
Right.
Meatloaf.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough.
Because there's no such thing.
Yeah. You just
I like
dab
that.
his forehead with the
Yeah.
handkerchief
Yeah.
and go.
If Liberace was still alive, I'd let him do it. How about that?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Awesome. And so, who are you going on tour with?
Josh Groban.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. And whereabouts are you guys going with that?
Just the States.
Okay.
Yep. States, amphitheaters.
And
Outside.
when? What time of the year? When's that going to be? What month?
Starts mid-July. Goes to the end of August.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
come out and see him. Anything you're doing? Website, Facebook? How do
Yeah,
you
my
get in touch
website,
with you?
blairsinta.com. I'm writing, like I said, I'm writing library checks. I'm producing music.
Mm-hmm.
I have a studio at home, so I do drum sessions out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything we can do these days to keep it rolling.
Diversify.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Okay. See you guys. Beabetterdrummer.net, and we'll see you soon.